Chapter 4, this is part 2, and now what I'm going to do is go over ABC costing. And the cost of quality report, I don't know if I'm going to go over that, probably won't. So the focus of this is how to do the homework when you're doing ABC costing. And it's just a step-by-step process. Now, again, we have these various ways we can allocate overhead, and what we're going to cover is ABC costing. So again, we had these 3 different rates. I talked about plant-wide and department-wide in part 1, and we're going to focus on ABC costing. Now, activity-based costing, we use information to do pricing and product mix, because if you have 2 products, you really want to find out which one are you making money on. And how do you price it? How do we cut costs? You want to see which one, what's driving your costs for planning and control. Now, this is what we call the cost hierarchy used to establish cost pools. So what we do, we look at the whole process, and the first thing we identify is which one are faculty levels. These are incurred no matter how many unit batches or products are produced. Then we have the product level. These are incurred for a particular product. Then we have the batch level. These are incurred for every batch. And then we have the unit level. They're incurred for every unit. This is how we're going to identify cost drivers, depending on what level they are and how we collect the costs. Now let's look at some examples. So, how would we classify them using the cost hierarchy? The first is, what would we categorize? Each container is cut from the mold once the plastic has cooled and hardened. That would be a unit level cost driver. Patents are obtained for each new type of container mold. That would be product level. Plastic resins are used as the main direct material for the containers. That would be unit level. A plant manager oversees the entire operation. That would be faculty level. And sales force incurs travel expenses. That would be faculty level. Now let's look at some more. Each container product line has a product line manager. That would be product level. The extrusion machine is calibrated for each batch. That would be batch level. Each type of container has its own unique molds. That's product level. Routine maintenance performed on the extrusion machines. That's faculty level. And rent is paid on the building. That would also be faculty level. So that kind of gives you an example. Now let's look at some actual cost drivers that we might use. Now here's the thing. You don't want too many of these because you've got to keep track of them. So usually 5 to 7 at the most. Now, material purchasing, that activity we might want to track based on number of purchase orders. Material handling, number of parts. Production schedule, number of batches. Quality inspections, number of inspections. Photocopying, number of pages. And warranty services, number of service calls. So let's look at how it flows. So, activity-based costing focuses on activities and follows 3 steps. First, we identify activities and assign costs to the activity pool. Then we compute an overhead activity rate for each activity pool. And then we assign overhead costs to the cost objectives, which is the product. So if you look at this little diagram, this is also in your book. So in this case, we've identified 5 activities: production, setup, design, and factory services. We then decided how to allocate each one of these. Remember, this is the overhead cost we're talking about. Production would be cost per labor hour, cost per setup, cost per design change, cost per foot, and those would be and then we would apply them based on the usage of each one of those things. I think the best way to do this is let's look at an example. In this case, we have Mike's company uses a plant-wide overhead rate for its products based on machine hours. The estimated total overhead cost is $1,440,000 and the estimated machine hours are 12,000. Now what we've done is we've gone ahead and turned around and broken down these activities based on cost pools and cost drivers. So we have maintenance. Machine maintenance cost is going to be number of machine hours. Engineering change orders is going to be number of change orders. And hazardous waste disposal is going to be based on the pounds of hazardous waste generated. So now what we have here is we have the cost pools. You notice it equals our total overhead cost, which it should. But we're going to allocate it based on 3 cost drivers, which is a good number. You don't want to, again, you don't want too many because then it gets too complicated. Now, we had an actual job at which produced 1,000 units that we're going to sell at $27 each, was started and completed with the following usage: and direct materials and direct labor. And we also know how many hours of direct labor for our plant-wide overhead, but we also know the usage based on our cost drivers. We've got the amount of machine hours, the change orders, and the hazardous waste. So first, what is the total cost using plant-wide overhead? What is it using ABC costing? So step 1 is we're going to identify our total budgeted indirect costs. Again, you want to identify this by looking at the problem. So we've got $1,440,000. We're going to select an allocation base, which in this case is machine hours. And we're going to come up with a rate, which is $120 per machine hour. So now we've got our plant-wide, which is the one that's used. Now let's take a look at ABC costing. What would the rates look like? So we've identified our indirect costs and our cost drivers. Now we can compute our rates based on maintenance machine cost, engineering change orders, and hazardous waste disposal. So now we ended up with 3 rates to allocate the total overhead versus 1, which is the plant-wide one. So now let's actually allocate to see what's going to be our difference. So for machine hours, we're going to take 90 times 70, which is our machine hour rate under ABC costing. Change orders at $20 per change order, we had 6. And then we had 30 pounds of hazardous waste, so that's how much we would allocate. Now for the plant-wide, we would just use our machine hours, and it would be 10,800. So you can see there's a big difference between ABC costing and plant-wide. Now let's take a look at the total cost per unit. So we're going to add our direct materials and our direct labor. And now we have our total cost. We're going to divide by the 1,000 units that we produced. And then we're going to take those costs minus the selling price. And if you notice with this, that if we used plant-wide overhead rate, we're actually losing money on our product. I mean, because we think we're making a profit of $345, but if we use ABC costing, we're actually losing money. So again, activity-based costing, if you have a different usage of the different activities based on the product produced, then activity-based costing is going to be your best choice. But again, it's not easy to do. Now, cost benefits. Do the benefits of adopting ABC costing exceed the costs of implementing it? The benefits are higher for companies in competitive markets. It's an accurate product cost information where it's very essential. It can pinpoint cost savings because it can tell you what's the cost drivers, and if cost drivers, you can go in and look at why it's so high. Benefits are higher when risk of cost distortion is high. When you have many different products, many different types and amounts of resources, you have high indirect costs, and you have a high and low volume products. Now, if we compare overhead cost allocated to custom models is higher under ABC costing because custom models use more activities that drive overhead costs. ABC costing emphasizes activities and their costs and better reflects how overhead costs are used, and plant-wide and departmental methods do not capture products' difference use of activities and can distort overhead costs. So again, if you have a simple product and you don't have a lot of overhead costs, then the plant-wide or department are fine. But if that's not the case and you have a lot more complexity in what's going into the units, ABC costing is a better method for you to find the true cost of your product. So, low volume complex products are undercosted, and high volume simpler products are overcosted when you use plant-wide and departmental methods. And that ends Chapter 4 presentations.